Hello, everyone. My name is Pastor Greg Grimes. I'm the pastor of Mount Tabor Church, and I welcome everyone that has came and going to share with us this moment in our worship services here at Mount Tabor. I know that the coronavirus, has been a great topic of discussion the last few weeks, and we at Mount Tabor Church have experienced it as well, and we're doing the protocol of dismissing our services here at the church, but we're coming to you via the web and to be able to reach beyond our church boundaries and go into your homes, into your computers, and into your cell phones to be able to have the worship experience that we all need and that we all need to share in. But once again, we do pray for all those that have been affected by the coronavirus and those that are keeping inside, keeping themselves safe and keeping themselves out of harm's way. And I think that's the right thing to do, and I think that's what we need to continue to do, and that's what we encourage here at Mount Tabor Church. But anyway, we are glad for you are coming and sharing with us here for a few moments here at Mount Tabor Church, in our worship service. And we're going to come to you every week until this coronavirus is no longer a threat and no longer being a threat to us as a church as we gather here in our church services. But anyway, beyond that, we know that we need to be praying for those that are affected by it and for those that are most vulnerable. And that is our wish and our mission here at Mount Tabor Church now, to be able to do that and get beyond, one day get beyond this virus and be able to go on with our normal lives. But we pray that'll happen real soon. And it's my prayer, and I know that is your prayer as well. But anyway, once again, glad that you have tuned in with us, and I pray that you will continue to do that. And but we want to share some thoughts with you that we have thought about and been praying about, and I believe the Lord has brought to me, and we're going to share that with you a little bit here today. Our scripture is going to be found in Luke 19 and in verse 10, and it says these words. It says, "For the Son of Man has came to seek and to save that which was lost." And the thought that I had today, and especially in the day and age that we live, is the idea of the feeling of being lost. And maybe not know exactly what's going on or what our direction is, or maybe what the Lord's plan is in our life. But regardless of all that, there's a lot of times we have anxiety and we feel like that being lost is where we're at today in the age that we live. But in our thought for this idea of being lost, a few years ago, there was a drama on TV that was entitled Lost. And it aired between September of 2004 to May of 2010. And its seasons, and its 6 seasons being on the air, it talked about a plane flight that was between Sydney, Australia, and Los Angeles, California. And on that journey that this plane crashed, and this episode, or these episodes in this TV series, was about what they did during that moments that they were stranded on this remote island out in the South Pacific. And many of us today feel maybe that is going on with us, and we're going to address that here in just a few moments. But also there was another TV series, maybe some more of my age group, was a TV series called Lost in Space, which was a sci-fi oriented TV series, and it aired between 1965 and 1968. And it talked about this family Robertsons that would venture out into space and colonize what's out there and explore what's out there. And while on their journey, they become lost. And it talks about the adventures of them being lost and what they dealt with and the emotions that came along with it. And there's been many different TV series about being lost and what people and their feelings and the emotions that goes along with it. But we as Christians as well have a tendency to feel the same way as these TV series tried to portray, that we become that fearful, and maybe even at times even being lost. But we ourselves need to address that and how we're dealing with this day and age we live, where the coronavirus seems to be prevalent, and we're staying indoors, and we're not meeting, and we're not greeting like we did in times past. And so we're dealing with that. And I know that you're dealing with that. And sometimes we become lonely and sometimes anxious, and all those emotions begin to arise. But I believe God deals here in our scripture about the issue of feeling that way and what we need to do about it. In Luke 19, it begins to address a certain individual by the name of Zacchaeus, and also his approach of how he felt when he was lost, lonely, and really not having much friends because of the circumstances, maybe that even he's chosen. But it tells me in Luke 19, starting in verse 1, it says these words. Then Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. And now behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. And he sought to see Jesus, who Jesus was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was short of stature. So he ran ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was going to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house. So he made haste and came down and received him joyfully. But when they saw it, they all complained, saying, he has gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner. Then Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, and said, Lord, I give half of my goods to the poor, and I've taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I restore fourfold. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he is also of the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. The dictionary describes lost in this manner. That the lost is the being unable to find one's way, not knowing one's whereabouts, or the idea, help me, or maybe the idea that we're lost. And similar words would be something like the idea of going astray, or maybe off course or off track, or maybe disoriented, or maybe adrift, or maybe just going around in circles and not really knowing which way to go. That's one way to address or thinking about this idea of being lost. The second one the dictionary began to tell us about is the idea of only one that could recapture something that they have lost, maybe something in the past, or maybe even our youth. Or similar words would be something like in the past or in the former, or maybe something that has happened one time or previous, maybe it departed or vanished, forgotten or unremembered, or the idea of lost and gone, or lost in time, or maybe just plainly out of date. These are the things that we as Christians and non-Christians alike deal with, that we feel this idea or this thought of being lost and not knowing exactly what direction we're going or where we're headed. But we find in the story of Zacchaeus that we see that this man himself, by the name of Zacchaeus, felt very much the same way. That Zacchaeus himself was a man that was a tax collector. He held great positions in his life, and that he himself is probably not very well thought of in his community amongst his Jewish brethren. That he himself collected the taxes, and in the process of collecting the taxes, what he would do is collect the tax, but that was to be given to Rome, but he also collected a little extra tax to put in his own pocket and pad it. And this is what his brethren, or his Jewish citizens, didn't think too much of him for, because of him being able to take that and pat his own pockets. But the idea here that whether it's his fault or someone else's fault, that we see in the story that Zacchaeus himself felt lost. He was looking for something that would bring him to a place where that he wasn't all alone, or maybe even fearful, or maybe he feels like that maybe he can regain something that he once lost. that maybe you and I that at times feel that way, that we have felt lost and we need to regain some things that we once had. Psalms 27:13 says this. It says, I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Jeremiah 50:6 says these words. It says, my people have lost sheep. And it goes on to say that they have forgotten their resting place. In our Bible reading today, we're going to be talking about Zacchaeus and all the things that he dealt with emotionally, but also the things that he done to be able to help his situation in life, to be able to regain something that he felt like that he really needed. And once again, in our story with Zacchaeus, that we see Zacchaeus was a tax collector. He was in the city of Jericho and learned that Jesus, the prophet that he had heard so much about, was going to pass through the city. And since Zacchaeus was short in stature, and that because of the things that was going on in his society, that he felt like that he could not approach him with the crowd, so he decided that he would run ahead of the crowd and choose a place where he was going to pass by. And when he chose the place, he seen a tree. And because of his short stature, that he decided to climb up into the tree to be able to get a glance or get a look at Jesus. And maybe even in his mind, he might have thought, well, don't know what might take place, but he knew that Jesus was going to walk right by that tree. And that's the one that he chose. So Zacchaeus. And we see that's exactly what Zacchaeus had done. And many of us, and when we were young, and probably if you're involved in youth organizations, especially the very young, that you yourself have come up with this song that Zacchaeus, a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. And the song goes on, they said he climbed up into a sycamore tree. And this is where that we find Zacchaeus. We find him that he is in a tree. He's waiting there for Jesus to pass by, waiting for maybe something to change in his life because of his anxiety and maybe because him feeling lost and separated from his community. But we see this. And many of us deal with this issue of feeling lost and lonely, especially since the coronavirus has really plagued our nation and the world. And the question becomes is, how do we deal with that emotionally? How do we deal with this feeling of being alone and separated from the ones we love? Maybe we can get a phone call or a text or something, which does help, but nothing like being in personal contact with the individuals. But Zacchaeus himself felt very much the same. And we find that Zacchaeus went and he climbed up into this sycamore tree, waiting for that chance, that moment that his life may change because of his acquaintance with Jesus. Because Zacchaeus knew that what Jesus had done in the past, he understood that Jesus was a man that's speaking great words, but also heard of some of the great miracles that he had already done. So maybe in Zacchaeus' mind, maybe he thought somehow, some way that Jesus could do something for him. You know, we began to think about this, but I want to talk about just a little bit about the image of Zacchaeus. And in Luke 18:11 says these words. It says, the Pharisee stood by himself and prayed. It says, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. Besides Zacchaeus' small stature, the thing that defined Zacchaeus to himself and probably to the community was his ability to collect tax, that he was probably very good at it. He had the authority from Rome to do it. And not only did he collect it for Rome, but also he collected for himself as well, to be able to pad his own pockets and to be able to live in somewhat of luxury in his day and age. But, we began to think about Zacchaeus and the image that he put forth out into the community. And even though that Zacchaeus himself collected, and that was his job to do, but the crowd, his Jewish brethren did not like him very well because of this, because of him collecting his tax, and it was very hard on them financially for them to take and give him the tax that he says that they were owed. And this created an image for Zacchaeus. And the people of that day looked at Zacchaeus, and that the image they got, that he was a tax collector, and many of them alienated him because of that. And maybe even Zacchaeus himself knew that he himself was alienating himself away from his brethren. That was a choice that he made. But at this point in life, there was something that took place that propelled him to be able to go and climb up into this sycamore tree to wait to where Jesus is going to pass by. So the thought that I thought about, that his image was one of hardship on a lot of people, but we find there's some things that he did. In verses 3 and 4 of the passage, it says these words. So he sought to see who Jesus was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was short of stature. So he ran ahead, climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was going to pass that way. The action of Zacchaeus is very curious. And even though his prestige and the things that Rome put upon him to do, but yet we find that he took action to be able to do something in his life, maybe to make a difference. The thing that I see in Scripture that really comes out to me, especially in this passage, is the idea that he climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he's going to pass that way. I wonder for sure in the passage, what was Zacchaeus wanting to see? Was he wanting to see Jesus for his physical attraction? Was he just wanting to see someone that is popular, that someone that is many people have been talking about in that day? Or could it be that he was going to look for something that might be making a change, could make a change in his life? I think it's good to be able to run ahead and be able to see Jesus, because it is a marvelous moment in his life, I am sure. But I wonder how much in Zacchaeus' life that he wanted his life to change, and knowing that Jesus had changed many lives previous to this moment. But I wondered if Zacchaeus in himself wanted something to change. I began to think that when the thought that Zacchaeus climbed up in the tree to see, that maybe there's some things that took place that maybe got a hold of Zacchaeus' attention. We all know the story quite well, I'm sure. Many of you that has read this story, that we begin to see that Zacchaeus ran ahead and climbed up into the sycamore tree, and he waited there for the passing of Jesus and the crowd. And we began to see that when Jesus did pass, not only in close proximity, but right past the very tree that Zacchaeus climbed up in. And then we find that in the story that we see that the way it unfolded is said that Jesus came and stood where the tree was. And he said that he looked up into the tree, and he said that he looked and he saw Zacchaeus, this man that had propelled himself to take action and go ahead of the crowd, climb up into this tree. They might be able to see Jesus, to make maybe some type of difference in his life. But yet we find that Jesus stopped to the very tree where Zacchaeus was at. I always thought that was real curious. I feel like this very thing is so true, that Jesus himself knows exactly where we're at. He knows where we're at emotionally. He knows exactly where we're at physically. He knows exactly where we're at in our anxiety levels, in our fear levels, and in our faith levels, and all of these things. Jesus knows exactly what we need, even though maybe at times that we don't. And we see in the story that when Zacchaeus was in the tree and Jesus stopped at the tree, that Jesus looked up, and this thing that I find that just amazing to me, and it gives me so much faith and hope, that he looked up into the tree and he saw this man. And the thing that I really enjoy in this passage, that he just didn't say to the man to come down, but he called him by name. He said, Zacchaeus, make haste to come down, for today I must abide at your house. You know, I can't imagine what the emotions of Zacchaeus must have been like. I can't imagine that that this man by the name of Zacchaeus, that was small and hated probably by most that was there that day, but Jesus took time out of his schedule, took time out of this busy moment in his life, this thronging of the crowd, to come and call him by name. You know, I don't know about you, but there have been many times in my life that I feel like Jesus done me the very same way. That I was in my tree of anxiety, or in my tree of fear, or my tree of loneliness, or my tree of being lost. And Jesus stood right in my tree, right beside my tree, and he said, Greg, come down, or we need to talk. And I think that so many times that is exactly what happens to a lot of us, that we need to talk to Jesus. I want you to notice something, that Zacchaeus didn't speak to him first, but Jesus spoke to Zacchaeus first. That a lot of times that we ourselves need just to listen to the Lord, to listen to his moments that he speaks to us and begins to speak to our heart. But I want you to notice something. It didn't just call him by name and called him Zacchaeus, which is truly who he was. But also it tells me in the passage, they said, I want you to come down. I want you to come to where I'm at. For today I must abide at your house. For you see, the passage begins to lend us the idea that Zacchaeus needed to come where Jesus was, that maybe sometime in Zacchaeus' life, he knew what was right and what's wrong. And a lot of times that you and I are exactly the same way in our tree of loneliness, or in our tree of grief, or in our tree of being lost. Jesus never left. But Jesus came to where we're at and be able to bring us to where he is. Doesn't that give us an excitement? Doesn't that really give us an emotion of knowing that Jesus is concerned where we're at? That Jesus is so concerned about our emotional grief and anxiety and being lost and the worry and fear of maybe the coronavirus or whatever is going on in your life, that Jesus is concerned about that. He's concerned about Zacchaeus. He's concerned about his place in life. You know, even though he stole from people and he was greedy and he left many people in need of financial resources that he took and he exploited and put in his own pockets to be able to do whatever he wanted to with it. But yet Jesus stopped where he was at. In Zacchaeus' sin, in Zacchaeus' moment of lostness, and he took a moment to be with him. The next thought that I had is that Jesus came to the house of Zacchaeus. You know, we find that Zacchaeus, even though he climbed up in the tree waiting to be, for whatever he thought might happen, but yet when Jesus took the time to be able to call him by name and ask him to come to where he was at, and that he did. But we find that Jesus made a statement. He says that I need to go to abide at your house. You know, I can only imagine what the crowd must have thought. That the crowd probably was jeering. They was probably ridiculing and asking the question. And says, well, why would Jesus go with this man that's a right out sinner? Why would he go to his house? That these people were wondering and questioning in this, that Jesus interrupted their moment to be able to have a time and a moment with Zacchaeus. You know, many times that maybe we as a church need to have times of interruption. Maybe at times like this that we're experiencing, that we are not having church here in our physical church, but yet we're having church still. That church is not necessarily in just the four walls that we call our church. Church, yeah, it's great, and I think it's very needful, and we need that moments that we can get together and we feel that love and embrace from one another. But yet, I feel like we need to get beyond the walls as well, and including in the walls, but also out the walls, to be able to reach those that are in need. And maybe God is using this moment to be able to do that for us, and maybe to be able to reach out to those that are in need and to be able to supply their needs. And if nothing else, pray for them, and knowing that God in all of his ability is to be able to do what he does so well. You know, this is the thing that I found in my research, that Zacchaeus' name meant pure and innocent. You know, we know that in the life of Zacchaeus and all his approach to his brethren Jews, which Zacchaeus was a Jew, and he was taking money from the Jews to give it to the Rome occupiers of their nation, and yet we find his name meant pure and innocent. I thought that was quite remarkable. In verses 7 and 8, it says these words: "But when they saw it, they all complained, saying, 'He has gone to be a guest with a man that is a sinner.' And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord," it says, "Look, Lord, I give half of my goods to the poor, and if I've taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I will restore fourfold." You know, on this journey to Zacchaeus' house, we see that there are some things that we need to discuss here in just a few moments, and we feel like that Zacchaeus himself, when Jesus had asked, well, not even asked, but told Zacchaeus, "I need to go to your house. I need to abide with you today. There are some things that I need to talk to you about." I think that this was probably the premise of the passage. And it begins to say in this conversation, or in this moment, or this time of release, this time of feeling like that he's not lost anymore because Jesus took time out of his schedule to be able to talk to Zacchaeus and be a part of his life. That Zacchaeus began to get it. He began to understand exactly what life is all about. You don't have to feel lost, or you don't have to feel anxious in life. But we find in this story, it tells me that Zacchaeus made a transformation. There was a change in Zacchaeus' life. It tells me that Zacchaeus himself said these words. It says, "Lord, if I have taken anything by false accusation," it says, "I will restore them fourfold." I say remarkable. You know, how many times that we ourselves has felt that God has touched us in our lives, that maybe we have felt lost, or maybe we just didn't truly understand our journey, living for the Lord, that maybe somehow God opened it up for us to be able to find what true living really is. Zacchaeus himself found it. And maybe you and I, in these next few days or weeks that we're apart, that maybe we'll find that too, that we'll find that moment that we need the Lord. And some things that I want you to leave you with, some food for the thinkers this morning. Food for thinkers. The meaning of the life of Zacchaeus is only found in Jesus. And I want to go on to say that the true meaning of life is not found in anything else other than in the life of Jesus. You know, we ourselves get busy doing the things that we do, and nothing wrong with that. We got to provide a living for our family. But something we don't want to do is to forget the importance of who Jesus is and the importance of that within our lives. And the question that I want to ask you today is, how important is Jesus to you? Do you feel lost? Do you feel maybe even abandoned? Do you feel anxious or fearful? Do you feel dread or worry? You know, I find that in Jesus, we don't have to feel those ways. In Matthew 18:11, it says these words, "For the Son of Man has came to save that which was lost." Also, Luke 9:25, it says these words, "For what profit is to a man if he gains the whole world and is himself destroyed or lost?" You know, many of us today, I want you to feel assured that Jesus is with you, that Jesus is here. He's here with Zacchaeus. He's here with you. And I know that he can make transformations in your life. So today, as we begin to think of our days ahead, remember that Jesus loves you, that he cares for you. He's going to help you in your moments that you're feeling lost and anxious or fearful, that he's here with you. He's calling to you, and all that we need to do is to respond and say, "Lord, here I am." And then he's going to say, "I need to come and abide with you." And then all we need to do is to say, "Yes, Lord." Once again, it's great to be a part of your time here on Sunday morning. We want to say that we love you. We appreciate you tuning in to us, and we're planning on doing this for the next few weeks until we can get things back to where we were as far as worshiping here at our church. But I want to say God bless. You're in our prayers. You're in our thoughts. And we love you. And we will be back here again next Sunday. We may try to do a little little sermon or something maybe on Wednesday night, maybe for 10, 15 minutes, just to kind of help with the devotional time here this week. So we'll be working on that. Hopefully we'll get that done. But once again, God bless. Have a great day. And until we see you soon. Thank you.